This is Social Responsibility Pre-Norming. I'm Dr. Melissa Elston, and we are all here. Okay, so the purpose of what we're doing today, so the way that assessment works at our campus, some of you may have worked different places. Assessment happens in various forms, but the way we do it, we've got a system called key assignments. And so what faculty do is they create a quality aligned assignment that corresponds to the rubric that we're using to conduct our assessment that year. If the assignment's aligned, then the artifact becomes aligned as well, and it's fully accessible. We can check for all the things that are there on that rubric. This leads to more reliable, more valid, and more accurate student measures of student proficiency. So that's the theory. It works pretty well in my experience. And so where we are in this cycle is we're at the very beginning. We are trying to get those quality aligned assessments. So what this is in a nutshell, today is an opportunity to discuss and better understand the rubric that we've got. Okay. It's an opportunity to align your assignment with the current rubric, and I'm emphasizing current because these rubrics do change from cycle to cycle. We do have a review and revision process, but this is the opportunity to work today with what we've got currently. This is the rubric that we're going to use going into the current assessment cycle. It's an opportunity to understand how that rubric can be applied across disciplines. This is one of the tricks of these rubrics is you want to keep them general enough where people can use them in a variety of disciplinary contexts. And we want to be able to talk to each other about it across our different disciplinary silos. And finally, this is just a general opportunity to better understand our Ilo assessment practices here at PAC. So if you just got here, if you haven't been at Palo Alto College long, this is a pretty good opportunity for you to figure out how the system works here. That's what this is. We're familiarizing ourselves with the rubric that we're going to use this year, and then we're going forth and applying that to key assignments. Taking a cue from my colleague John Lapete. He used to have a slide like this when he did it, so I'm gonna do so as well. So here's what this is not, and knowing what it's not also takes the pressure off us a little bit. This is not an opportunity to make changes to the social responsibility rubric. We do have the rubric that we're going to use this year. But that said, if you see problems or opportunities to improve the rubric, places where the wording maybe needs to be refined or smoothed out, we actually do have a process for that. And I am going to speak for Amanda here because I know she agrees. We would both be delighted for you to take part in this process. Some of you actually have. It's typically over the summer. Sometimes it comes with a little money, although, that's always contingent on funding. But yeah, we have a group of faculty who come together and look over the rubric, make suggestions, and create a revised rubric for the next cycle. So today is not our opportunity to critique it, but if you see something that you would like to see change, email me or Amanda, and we'll put you in the group that works on the next round of revisions. The other thing that this is not is an opportunity to discuss the necessity of the rubric for your courses. We do take measurements of each ILO in specific courses. If you're wondering, like, why am I measuring this? Here, I'll just show you right here. And this is in the list of links that I sent out a little bit earlier. We have this neat document called the course crosswalk, and it shows you the array of, I don't know if you guys can see my mouse moving, but there's an array of the 6 ILOs over here on the top right-hand side. And you could scroll down through and see where all the measurement points are in courses. So like, for instance, social responsibility, the one that we're measuring today, we take measurements in these classes, the language, philosophy, and culture. So yeah, I'm not sure what courses some of these respond to because I'm not in philosophy, but English, just a glance at that tells me that's all the literature courses. So that's one of the things that the people in my discipline are charged with at this stage. Yeah, creative arts, American history, government and political science, social and behavioral sciences, and some additional language, philosophy, and culture courses. So yeah, if you're ever interested in how this all fits together, you can come back to this happy little document. Okay, let's get back to the slideshow, maybe. Let's see, there we go. So here's today's agenda. We're going to review the key assignments and the current social responsibility rubric wording, just so you know what's in there. And then we're going to go criterion by criterion, and there's only 3. And you're going to have an opportunity to consider how that applies to the assignment that you want to use as your key assignment. You'll be able to talk it over with a colleague or two. And, if there's a place that you need to sort of workshop it and make it a little bit better, or, I mean, better is not even the word I want to use, because there's plenty of good assignments that aren't precisely aligned to the rubric. But what I mean by better is, for the purposes of assessment, you can workshop it and tweak it a little bit to correspond to the rubric. And that's really what today's opportunity is about. And then after we discuss the 3 criteria, and we talk a little bit about how your own key assignments can key into each one of those things, then we're going to take a quick spin through the assessment process in general. You just kind of lay out a basic timeline for everybody so you know what's coming up. And that's really all we've got on the agenda today. Does anybody have any questions before we go on? Okay. Well, by the way, when I'm in this mode, I can't see the text chat. So if there's anything in text chat that you guys see crop up that feels like it needs to be addressed pretty immediately, if somebody would bring that to my attention, I'd really appreciate it.
Are we going to have more sessions than just this one?
Well, this is the big session for pre-norming. Now we are going to make the recording available to people who had to teach today. I know that there is a limited subset of faculty who teach on Fridays. So, but no, this is a big show. You're here. You're at the right place.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, let's go ahead and get started then. So the key assignment, this is a quick explanation for those who haven't done one before. What is it? It's an assignment that prompts students to demonstrate proficiency in each part of the social responsibility rubric. And we'll show you the rubric here in a second. So it prompts for each criterion on that rubric. It is a regular part of the course curriculum, meaning this is an assignment that you generally give every semester. I mean, you may make some tweaks here and there, but this is a typical part of your class. And it's also completed by all students in the course. In the past, we did have a little bit of trouble with people not understanding what the key assignment was, and they'd get their list of the students whose samples they were supposed to pull for assessment, and then they would give a key assignment just to those students. Like, that's not the ideal way to do it. What we want to do is take our measurement from something that you're doing with the whole class as just sort of a regular course, part of doing business in that course. So yeah, that's what we're looking for. And some tips that, and these are compiled both from previous colleagues who've done this work, and then my own tip at the end, I think can be helpful. So the first thing you want to do is you want to make the implicit explicit. So I think, I'm speaking from experience here. When I first came to PAC, I looked at the ILOs and I thought of them sort of generally and conceptually, and I'm like, oh, neat. Yeah, my assignments do all that. And even when it came time for assessment, I got my assessment list, and I think it was, I think social responsibility was the first ILO that I ever helped assess. And I remember thinking, oh yeah, this term paper I'm assigning out shows social responsibility because they got to think about a social issue. Great, done. I don't have to do anything else. And now I kind of cringe when I look back on that because it was well-meaning, but the problem was there were a lot of things on that rubric that were kind of implicit in my assignment, but that my assignment didn't necessarily explicitly draw out of the students. And so what you're going to want to do is look at each part of that rubric and make sure that your prompt is explicitly asking for something along those lines. The second tip I can give you is just a reminder from another colleague. Student work can't be expected to reflect the rubric if we're not prompting them for each part. So I think these two tips kind of go together. And then, finally, and this is the thing that I try to emphasize to other faculty who are, working on their first key assignment. I think there's a tendency to think of it as, it's important to the institution. So we feel like it needs to be a really big, important assignment in our course. And so people tend to think of like term papers and, semester-long projects, midterms, et cetera. I mean, don't get me wrong, like major papers and major assignments can be key assignments if it works out that way and if that works for your class. But it can also be a lesser weighted assignment. The grade percentage that you've assigned to this thing and the amount of prominence that it plays in your class, those are kind of secondary concerns. I mean, the only thing that really matters is that the assignment prompt asks the students for what's on the rubric. So you can use a term paper assignment, but honestly, I've sometimes used like little pre-writing exercises and that were maybe like, I don't know, like 1% of their total grade. I mean, it was like, kind of like what high school teachers would call daily work. And it worked just fine because it was an assignment that prompted for every part of the rubric. People, students demonstrated each part of the rubric and it created a rateable artifact. So don't feel the pressure to make this a big deal. I mean, you can actually make a pretty good key assignment out of something that you just happened to do on a Thursday with your class. Nathan, I see you raise your hand. What would you like to add?
I would just add to what you were saying about how it does not have to be a massive assignment. And this is, of course, not to say that one shouldn't do that if that's the way they have it worked out. But I would just say, keep in mind, what kind of assignments would you like to have to rate? Something that may be between 3 and 5 pages or something that may be between 10 and 20 pages. Just something for all of us to keep in mind.
That's some real talk. And I appreciate it as somebody who does a lot of rating. I mean, I'm in the cycle, but since I work in a TLC, I also get pulled in on years I'm not on the list of faculty doing it. Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just about workload on your colleagues. It's also about you don't want things to get lost because you turned in a 10 or 15 page sample and the rater is tired and they miss something that the student actually did. Yeah. I think that there is some wisdom to keeping it somewhat short. Yeah, great. Thank you for that advice. Okay. Any other tips or tricks from those of us who've been doing this for a while? Okay.
I have a question. Actually, I have a question for, this is Aurora here. I'm in sociology and we have to rate 4 of the 6 ILOs. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I've done, and I will probably need some help with that, is that I try to include in the one assignment all 4 because I want to have just one assignment that can cover all 4. And so I think sometimes I might overwhelm the students. So I guess I'll need some help for that because I'm trying also not to make it harder for me where I have 4 different assignments. Mm-hmm. So I collected And I guess the question is also, so why is sociology doing all four, right? But
Mhm.
also end up getting an assignment that won't overwhelm them.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, you know, like the question of why is sociology doing this may be a little bit above my pay grade. I mean, my sort of from the hip answer is because sociology really does teach all those things. I mean, it's a pretty important discipline. And it's a pretty versatile discipline. Got a lot of respect for my colleagues who do that. But yeah, I mean, like as far as how not to overwhelm them, you know, I don't know that this is an official answer. I mean, don't take this as the official last word on these things. But you know, as somebody who's done it for a while, I think trying to create an assignment that corresponds to all four ILOs at once is pretty ambitious. I can think of assignments that might be able to do double duty, you know, in my own context. And
Yeah.
I'm hold on just a second. I'm gonna mute someone real quick. I think they don't realize they're on. Okay, there you go. You know, in my own context, I've tried to do those kinds of things because I don't want to have to reinvent the wheel a lot, you know, I do teach the same courses over and over. And yeah, having 4 rotating key assignments sounds like a lot. So yeah, and English, we get hit with a lot of them too. So I get it. But yeah, I think doing all of them in one sounds kind of ambitious, and I would be really impressed with the person who pulled that off. So that might be a clue that you might want to break them up and at least have like 2 double duty assignments. One for the first 2 ILOs and the other for the other 2. That's what I would do personally, but yeah, that's my best advice there. But that all said, this feels like a good time to plug that Amanda and I both really enjoy working with people one-on-one, helping them with their key assignments. So this actually kind of sounds like a fun puzzle. If you wanted to book some one-on-one time, and we can do it by Zoom. We don't have to make a big production of it, but yeah, if you or anybody else would like to book some one-on-one time, just sort of like sifting through your key assignments and refining them and figuring out what works. Yeah, I'm willing to do it. I love doing it. I know Amanda's willing to do it. That's what we're here for. So I'll conclude with that invitation. I see something popped up in the chat, but I can't read it. Does anybody else have any questions or comments that we need to attend to?
Yeah, sorry, I'm in the fine arts. I don't have my camera on today.
No worries.
But you know, early on, I'll say we were actually encouraged to make one assignment that covered all of our ILOs. I mean, when we did some of the norming or did, you know, key assignment creation, it was kind of something that we focused on.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, like, is there a way, I mean, in terms of overwhelming the students, that each semester there might be a way to communicate or really focus on the rubric being assessed that semester? Like, so in, you know, in fine arts, we have teamwork, critical thinking, communication, and social responsibility.
Oh,
which
gosh.
kind of all go into all of our assignments anyway, I find.
Yeah.
But maybe it's about delivering that rubric or really focusing on communicating that rubric to the student that semester.
That's interesting.
Kind of shift the focus a little bit while still keeping all of the tasks the same. Yes.
I think that is a really good strategy if you're going to try to double up or triple up or quadruple up. This is also like explaining to me why we got teamwork samples last year from some people for I think it was the critical thinking. Yeah, that's interesting. People, okay, I see what's happening here. Yeah. I mean, if you are able to pull that off, that's great. And I don't want to discourage you from doing that. I hope that doesn't sound like I'm trying to discourage you. I'm just thinking about how.
No, not at all.
Okay, good, good. I don't want to sound like I'm telling you, don't do the thing that's been working for you. But I can think of a lot of disciplinary contexts where it might be hard to cram all of those successfully into one assignment and do it well and have it be something that actually enriches the students.
Right.
You know, I wouldn't want to have to cram teamwork into every single key assignment. Like if I was trying, because like I do have to assess teamwork in some of mine, you know, some years. And I don't think I would do as good a job if I was trying to cram teamwork and some of these other things together. So for me, it makes more sense to just have 2 rotating key assignments. It's part of what I do as a general course of action, but you know, one year I pull from one and another year I pull from the other. Which, you know, also could be another argument for making these low stakes assignments so that you don't have to, you know, take an inordinate amount. I mean, the idea is that we're trying to take the temperature from something you're already doing. The idea is not to create a whole bunch of extra assignments that you've somehow got to shoehorn in on top of the things you wanted to do anyway. I don't think that's good assessing or good teaching. So, you know, the idea today is to try to figure out how to fit this onto things that you want to do anyway. I don't know that answered your question. But yeah, that is interesting that you got the advice to try to do all of them at once. How long ago was that? I'm just curious.
4 or 5 years. I don't
Okay.
know. Hard to say.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'm thinking, I mean, that maybe that was Julie's advice. I don't know. And like, I mean, and there may be contexts where that really works well. I know in my own context as a faculty member who does this a lot, like it wouldn't quite work for me. But I don't want to discourage somebody if they
I was
found
also
something
told,
better.
sorry to interrupt, but I was told the same thing, and it was about that
Mhm.
time period also. So we were told to
Okay.
kind of like to work smarter, I guess, in that way to make
Yeah.
it an assignment. But I can see how that's overwhelming.
Yeah, I mean, if there is a way to assess more than one ILO out of the same assignment, and you know, then yeah, I could see it being a case of like work smarter, not harder. I could also see like the more ILOs you start piling on, the more of a weird jigsaw puzzle you're playing with, right? And the more you have to sort of contort to fit. Yeah, I don't know, like it wouldn't work well for me, but if there's somebody who's doing it, more power to them. That's great. Yeah, okay. This is kind of an interesting thing. If anything, I hope that my answer is freeing some of you, if you don't want to do it that way, while at the same time authorizing you if you have been doing that way and you like doing it that way. How's that? Use your best judgment. Okay, other questions or comments about this? Yeah, I think it's great if you can double up or triple up, but I also don't want people to feel like they're under an obligation or a mandate to do that, especially if it feels awkward. Okay, let's talk about the social responsibility rubric real quick. We're at 9:30. My middle-aged eyes can't read the clock very well. Yeah, I think we're right on time. So the social responsibility rubric, it's got 3 parts. The first part, and I'm just going to read you the rubric language for each criterion. We'll look at the performance level language here in a minute. So the first thing students have to do is identify an intercultural, social, or aesthetic issue. Now there's some typos in the rubric itself. Somebody went in and stole all the commas. I don't know what that's about. So if you've been trying to imagine an issue that is at once intercultural, social, or aesthetic, stop it. It's at least one of those things. It doesn't have to be an intercultural, social, aesthetic issue. It's one or more. Students then analyze the issue from more than one cultural perspective, noting the broader influence, local, national, and/or global, of each perspective. And the way I like to describe this to people is this is the part where students put on somebody else's lens. And then on criteria 3, students then shift and put their own lens back on. Students analyze the issue from their own cultural perspective, noting whether or not embedded biases or prejudices affect their perspective. So identify the issue, look at it from at least one other cultural perspective, and then come back and look at it from your own cultural perspective and be a little thoughtful about that. Those are the 3 moves in a nutshell. And these are the 3 places where we rate. So all the raters who are assessing these things when you turn it in, I mean, yeah, we've got a rubric. It functions, you know, a little bit like a checklist. I mean, you know, when I'm rating, I look for each thing. Did the students do this, do this, do this? And then if I can say yes to all 3, then I go in and I start, you know, like assigning the proficiency level. But that's what the raters are looking for. So we're going to take a moment to look at Criterion 1 in a little bit more detail. And I am going to circle some things and talk about them just to bring your attention to them for use in planning. So Criterion 1, note that students must identify the issues themselves. If they're not being asked, like if your prompt does not specifically ask them to identify the issue, or if the issue is already identified for them, the assessment artifacts are in danger of being thrown out. And I see this a lot when I go to rate. It's not just this rubric. There's a couple of rubrics in our ILOs that ask for students to identify an issue. And it's a frequent, I hate to use the word mistake, but it's a frequent place of misalignment. I think there's plenty of perfectly good classroom assignments where the professor identifies an issue and then asks the student what they think of it. But for the purposes of assessment, we're trying to see if students are able to identify that issue. So this might be a place where if you're being assessed this year on this thing, you want to go back to your rubric and look at, or you want to go back to your assignment prompt and look and make sure that the students are being asked to identify the issue themselves. And Teresa, you raised your hand just now.
Yes, because some students have a hard time like narrowing down a subject or a topic or an issue. On the directions, can we give them like samples and say, here are some samples you could consider?
I might, what I might do in that case is maybe say, you know, here's an example. I wouldn't give them choices to pick from, because that's just, you know, like multiple choice reasoning basically. But
Yeah,
if
no, I
you
was just saying samples, like give them 2 or 3 samples so that they like broad samples, like, you know, I mean, I can't even think of anything right off the top of my head, but yeah, like give them 2 or 3 really broad examples that could kind of trigger their brain into processing.
I think that's okay. Yeah. I mean, because they're still coming up with the example themselves after that. Yeah. And I can think of situations where I would do that too with a student. Yeah, the thing the raters are going to be looking for is, did the student generate the example themselves? And yeah, I think you're coming up to the edge of that, but you're still staying on the right side of it. Yeah. And to be fair, like some students do sometimes, like they're unclear what you're asking them to do until you show an example of what you're asking them to produce. And then they're like, oh. So yeah, I think that's okay.
I have a quick question as well. Oh, sorry, you want to go, Lori?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
This is kind of along the lines of Teresa was saying. So we're covering a lot of issues right now, and one of them is the women's issue that exists during the Romantic and the Victorian period. And so would I ask students to kind of go back and reflect on some of the issues that we've discussed, identify one? Okay.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Yeah, that would align.
Look at the women's issue. Just go back, review what we've learned during the semester, you know, identify and examine one of the main or core issues of this particular period, and let's look at the cultural significance and the cultural impact it's made.
Yeah. As somebody who also teaches literature from that time period, I may be using a similar tactic in my own, because I'm getting assessed this year too, on this one. Yeah, that sounds like something I'm doing in my classes. And by the way, as I'm kind of, as we're kind of talking back and forth, and I'm responding to some of this stuff, just want to, like, emphasize, I'm working out of the TLC, but I'm also responding as a faculty member who has to do this every year. And I can tell you what's worked for me. So it's a little bit, that's kind of the positionality where some of this advice is coming from. Yeah. But yeah, that sounds like a pretty aligned assignment prompt to me. Do people have other comments?
That was a very similar question that I was going to ask. I teach Mexican American studies, and so we go over a lot of social issues. And so I'm looking at the identify. So it's kind of like, I was going to ask the same thing. If we, towards the end, go back, and so they're not really, I guess they're identifying it, but at kind of reviewing, because it's going to be something that we're teaching to them that they wouldn't have maybe identified on their own if we hadn't taught them or, made it, visible. So that's what I'm wondering, if it's okay to ask them to go back, select a topic. I mean, we do things, with education, labor, voting rights. So there are a lot of different topics that they can choose.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm wondering if that would be okay, if they're not necessarily creating it on their own, but, they're going back and kind of, keying in on one.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the reason we're assessing it in this way is that we want to see our courses equipping people to identify these kinds of issues by, by giving them the kind of exposure you're talking about. So that also seems reasonable to me. I think if you, it would be a weird assignment to just be like, like cold call, right? Like, hey, you identify an issue with these dimensions. I mean, you need it to make sense in the context of your course, right? And if your course has been talking about, issues pertaining to voting rights, for instance, I think it makes sense to prompt students to recall or think of, what is an issue related to voting rights that people have experienced in the context of this course.
Or even just make it pretty general, because they can choose, like they're all different types of issues that come up, because it's an interdisciplinary field of study. So they can, there's the, all different, there's the historical, there's, the political, there's, some art, we do, it's a little bit of everything. So they can pick some issue that we've discussed, and then, I think that'll give them at least an idea, something that they're familiar with regard to the content.
Right. Yeah. It definitely needs to be something that's like contextually related to your course. I mean, you don't want to just be asking students like general non sequitur questions. That's bizarre, right?
That's what I was like rereading. I was like, oh, identify, because in the past, I don't know if that's been really clear now that you've like, circled it or, and read. I'm like, oh, they have to identify like an issue. So it's like, do they have to like just on their own, because that, like you said, that's going to be difficult for students to just
right. You want to give them a little steering
going on, but so if we can prompt them and kind of give them
as long as they're the ones identifying, like they're doing the fine tuning and they're identifying the final issue, I think it's okay to like name some domains that they might look at, right? And again, speaking from my example, I teach a lot of British lit, and a lot of I'm thinking about the issues that commonly crop up in British literature classes. There's sort of the rise and movement of anti-Semitism and other forms of discrimination in Western culture. There's women's issues. I mean, particularly as you get into the Victorian period and like the woman question, as they called it, like looms large. There's class issues and labor issues that happen with the Industrial Revolution and the succeeding generations. And I could see prompting students with a general identify an issue related to race or class or gender, that we discuss this semester. I mean, that I'd be naming some domains in that case. I wouldn't just be like, tell me about an issue, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and placing it back into context of like the types of issues that we've discussed already. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that'll make it a lot easier now that I'm looking at it from that perspective. Thanks.
Sure. Okay. The other part that I just want to kind of go over briefly with everybody is this cluster of words: intercultural, social, or aesthetic. Sometimes it helps just to have common definitions of these things. And again, I want to emphasize that there's some missing commas here. These are three separate types of issue or options. Some issues may touch on both the intercultural and the aesthetic, or the intercultural and the social. But in order to satisfy this rubric, you need to have at least one of these things in your issue. So intercultural, here's a good working definition of that: occurring between two or more distinct cultural groups. Examples can include, but are not limited to, religious groups, groups from differing national or linguistic origins. Yeah, I mean, we're conceiving of cultural, pretty broadly here. The second word, social, pertaining to the structure and or function of a society. And then finally, aesthetic, pertaining to the appraisal or study of beauty and or taste. Those of you who are touching on the arts in your classes may find yourselves gravitating toward the aesthetic. Others of us, that may not play as prominent a role in what we teach. So the intercultural or the social would make more sense, but it needs to touch on one of those things. Does anybody have any questions about that? Would anybody like any additional clarification, or do we want to do a little bit of discussion about these words, or are we happy with this shared terminology?
I think it's really great, Melissa. I was wondering will we have, because this terminologies would be so helpful, like in the glossary, kind of like we did for some of the other rubrics. I just wanted to suggest, as we, this would be very helpful, I think, for a lot of our adjunct faculty and even for us to look at.
Thank you, Edlin. Yeah, we have for those who haven't been here for a while, the TLC assessment folks, we do have a running glossary of things that words that appear in the rubric, and every year we add a little bit more to it. I think these words are going to find their way there in short order. So, and I'd be happy to share the glossary page with everybody if you don't already have it bookmarked. But yeah, I think that's a good idea. That was kind of our plan with these words, because yeah, I think otherwise you do get into strange discussions sometimes about, well, what do we mean by cultural? And it's nice just to have a working definition that we can all kind of look to and say, okay, that's what we're working with today. Knowing that there are other definitions out there, but this is the one we're using.
Real quick, on your other slide about the rubric, I saw a little note that said that it's online. Where is it online at?
Yeah. Okay. So I actually, and you're talking about this place right here. Says, note, the full rubric is available online. Yeah, if you want to see the whole thing, not just in the pieces I'm showing you, on the list of links that I emailed out to registered participants this morning, it's there. Now, if you didn't register until right before the meeting, you didn't get that email. So what I can do, if you want to give me just a second, I'm gonna stop share. Let me drop this in the chat for some of the people who joined us on the morning of. Hold on. That way everybody's got access to this. Copy the. Okay, so yeah, because I realize I've mentioned this page a couple of times, and there may be somebody in here who, you know what, I just sent you guys the edit link. I'm not sure that's even going to work for you. Can you get into it that way? Do I need to resend the link? Let me copy. Here we go. Try that one. And that is, that's a list of all the links that that I'm referring to in this presentation. You've got the rubric there. You've got the cover sheet. You've actually got a preview of the cover sheet and the instructions that we're going to send out to the people who are giving us assessment artifacts. I've got a link to the ILO Crosswalk if you're interested in that. And I've also, just for posterity, given you links to the Jamboards that we're going to use to reflect, to record and reflect our conversation here in a second. Okay, so with that done, I'm going to share screen again. Give me just a second. Okay. Try this. Okay. We back where we were? Okay. So that's where you can find the full rubric online. I hope that's helpful for you. Go ahead and bookmark that list of links if it's stuff you don't already have and you find it helpful. We're going to move along here. So we've talked through definitions. Now, what I would like to do, I want to be merciful to the people who showed up today and didn't realize they had to have a key assignment. And also, you know, studies show us that people absorb information best in like 50-minute, hour-long chunks. You want to break up things. You don't want to just talk at somebody for 2 hours. So we're going to take a 5-minute break. If people need to go tend to biological needs, just kind of take a rest from the screen for a second, whatever you need to do. But this also gives people a chance, if you haven't grabbed a key assignment that you feel comfortable workshopping, this gives you a little bit of time to grab something from your class materials and look at it. So we're going to take about 5 minutes and then we will reconvene. See, it's 9:49. We will reconvene at 9:54. Okay. That ding came at an opportune time. I think we're right at the 5-minute mark. I hope everybody had a good break, and we're going to actually get into the workshoppy part of today's program. So in order to do this next part, you're going to want to have a copy of the assignment that you think you want to use as your key assignment this year. Those who've done this before, you probably know what's coming. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through criterion by criterion and just have a little conversation with some colleagues about whether your assignment reflects that criterion. And here, let me move and we do have a pretty big crowd today, so we'll go ahead and do this in breakout rooms. But what I'd like to do, I'd like to keep it constructive. So the discussion question is, based on the language in the rubric, how does your assignment prompt students to meet criterion 1? If your assignment doesn't yet prompt students to meet that criterion, just take a moment and workshop how you might tweak that. A lot of times people get real anxious and they feel like, oh my God, I've got to rip up my assignment and do something totally different. It's like, no. Sometimes it's just a tweak, it's just an addition or a slight change in wording or like one extra bullet point in the task list, right? So don't feel like you got to rip everything up and start over. If in the course of these conversations, you realize like, oh my God, I don't exactly align. I'm be opening all rooms now. We're going to take about 10 minutes with this, and then we'll come back and you just kind of share some reflections about the conversations that we just had. Okay, I'm opening rooms now. Okay, hi, everybody's getting yanked back. I hope you all had good, productive conversations about Criterion 1 and the way it gets reflected in your current key assignment draft. So what I'm going to do now, I'd like to give us an opportunity to kind of share what we talked about a little bit. So I'm going to put a link in the chat. I just dropped that, and it's going to take you to a Jamboard, which is a really fun product that Google creates. And so you can share your feedback or your reflections in two ways. The first way, of course, is if you just want to, speak up and talk it through on camera and kind of give us a rundown of what you guys discussed. The other way, if you'd rather be a little bit more anonymous, or if your coffee hasn't kicked in, or speaking today isn't your thing, you can also record your reflections anonymously here on this Jamboard. And I'm going to share my screen real quick so you guys can see what that looks like. Yeah, so if you can everybody see my mouse moving around? Can you guys see that?
I see it. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so if you go like right here and click, it'll give you a sticky note. You can choose a color and you can write your reflection here. And then if you hit save, it goes boom, and you can like move it around. And so, yeah, I mean, this is a way of recording your thoughts if you don't want to speak out loud, or if you're wanting to share simultaneously while somebody else is talking. I'll delete this to make space. Okay, so yeah, so did anybody have any good conversations about your assignment? How'd things go?
I gotta say, just real quick, Maria showed us her rubric, and just awesome. She's got it so well organized, and so I just wanted to pay her a compliment. I was so impressed.
Ooh, nice. Maria, is this something you want to share with everybody just in general?
Sure. Share my key assignment.
Yeah.
I can do it. I'd love feedback, because I was the one that said that I'm trying to assess all four rubrics.
Oh yeah.
I overwhelm my students. So let me bring it up.
Okay, I'm going to stop share so that you can share. And if it blocks you, let me make sure you're not. Okay, I'm gonna there. You shouldn't be blocked from sharing if you want to.
Okay.
Real quick.
So this is what it looks like. They're supposed to reflect on. They do sociological research. They interview community members. And then after they do the interviews, they do a PowerPoint presentation. So all of it is as a team, except for this part. Once they do their PowerPoint presentation, I ask them to reflect on their learning for when they did the interviews, when they did the PowerPoint. And so here, see, this is where I have the four.
I see that, yeah.
Rubrics. So
got it all.
Each Roman numeral represents one of those. So when I come down here, because sometimes they overlap. Mm-hmm. When I come down here, I basically ask them the question, and for me, I say, okay, well, this one is related to critical thinking and social responsibility. And so it's kind of
yeah, it's interesting. Like both of I see where that part could do double duty, right? Because both of those rubrics, I believe, ask the student to identify an issue. And yeah, I'm looking. Where is the place where you're thinking that aligns? Is it that very next sentence says what was the main idea, and then what topic / issue was introduced?
So for me, this one, at least in the social responsibility one, of course, I took it kind of directly from there about the topic and the issue. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of piggyback on it as to when number 1A, where I say, how was the message communicated? And that is more about
Wow.
critical thinking part. So yeah, then see, this is the first part, and then when you go further down, like here, organization, it has really basically nothing to do with social responsibility, but it has
Mhm.
a lot to do with some of the other rubrics. And so yeah, so
Okay.
that's basically how I did mine. And
That's an interesting way to do the assignment. So so I guess the thing to do today is just to go through and make sure that each criterion is still reflected, in that assignment. And I mean, to me, it's pretty like if I were a rater, I mean, I don't want to be like the voice, the definitive voice that arbitrates all these things. But I mean, if I were a rater, do you mind going back up to the top? And I'm looking for that first criterion where the student has to identify an issue. I see right here what topic / issue was introduced. I mean, they're the one who has to articulate that. So yeah, that to me feels pretty tightly aligned. Yeah, that's a good example. Thank you for sharing that. That's
all right.
cool.
I'll stop share here.
This is like the mega Voltron of assignments. Job. Okay, awesome. Other thoughts, other reflections people want
Dr. Elston, I have something that I used to use at St. Mary's University, and I started using here at Palo Alto, and I'm pretty sure you heard of it. It's the inverted triangle. Okay, and basically what I do is I'll give an assignment, and then I'll break it down into 5 quadrants, the most important, least, and then what are the main topics. What did you get out of it? And then the last one basically says, what did I learn from the topic? And I've used that, and I've learned that a lot of students, once they read a material, whether it be long, short, or whatever, have gotten to understand it, but they've also become better writers at it. There's more to the inverted triangle than just, because the inverted triangle normally has 3 spaces. I added 2 more.
I was going to say, what do you teach?
I'm sorry, political science.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I remember we had an inverted pyramid. I was a journalist before I went into English. We always had an inverted pyramid, but
As a matter of fact, for journalism,
it's the same idea. Like the big stuff goes up here, and the little
exactly, So that's what I do, and my students like it. They actually come out of there better writers. Now, you mentioned the as a former writer, if you remember the inverted triangle had a lot more detail in there because you have a lot more stuff that you, as a writer or reporter, if you were reporting something, requests on there, and the students actually go back in there. Now, I like that first one that Dale was talking about, and how it was set up, and that's pretty much what the inverted triangle is all about. And now that I've seen the social, one of the things I stress in my class, and matter of fact was yesterday, is critical thinking, because I'll ask a question, simple question like, you'll be surprised when you ask a question like, what do you know about the Alamo, Davy Crockett, and blah, 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 blah. And they give you this look like, huh? And I'm like, okay, so, do the research, and this is what they did or whatever. But that's what I use, the inverted triangle. And I'm glad you heard about it, so
Yeah. And it feels like, I mean, even if your assignment didn't already have a place to ask students, like, identify the issue. What issue are you looking at here? I mean, I feel like that would be a very easy thing to put in an inverted triangle sort of assignment, right? Because, that feels like question number 1, right?
Exactly.
It's kind of the big picture question, like what issue are we examining?
Exactly. Okay.
Yeah. Good. Okay. All right. I know we probably have a lot more that we could say right here, but I do want to get you guys out on time and respect your time today. Is there anything else people want to say about Criterion 1, the experience they had, trying to align to that? I'm going to broadcast real quick what's going on the Jamboard here. Yep. Oh, that's good. And these are anonymous. One of them, one note says, I think my group's biggest stumbling block point was how to direct students to the topic you want them to discuss while still allowing for the student to identify the topic themselves. Yeah, I feel like that's a really important tension to confront. And it seems to be kind of the tension that was driving some of the earlier questions. I think it's okay to guide students in a direction, like, you know, some of the folks were saying, you know, like, you know, what is one issue confronting women in the 19th century, or, you know, like, you know, what is one issue related to voting rights during the 20th century? Or, I mean, I think you can lay out some parameters like that, as long as you're not saying, you know, poll taxes are historically a way of da 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 da. You know, explain this issue to me, right? I mean, that's the place where the prompt might overstep and start to tread on that task on behalf of the students. So, but laying out some parameters, like the type of issue you want them to look at, the time period, if this is a sort of historically bounded class you're teaching, I think that's reasonable. You know, laying out certain contexts like that, I think, is fine. Does that help people feel a little bit better? Hopefully. And if you're still like struggling with it a little bit, I'm happy to take a look at your key assignment and you know, run it by Amanda. You know, a couple of us can take a look at it and give you our feedback. And I'm looking. Oh, go ahead.
Melissa, I know sometimes assessment is sticky, but I do want to share with the group that I teach in the teacher education department, and there's so many students that you know, commend the folks that are here within this Zoom about not only the subject matter, but the quality of the way they approach it and teach it and assess it. And so I just want to, you know, send a big shout out to you all that, you know, continue to do what you're doing. We can always get better. Today is a great day for a great day.
Oh, thank you, Suzelle. I think that's a really good reminder. Yeah, I mean, you're all doing the work, and you're all doing it in a way that resonates with students. You know, the whole purpose of today is just to figure out how to channel it in a way that we can measure easily. That's it. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. And yeah, I'm just reading through this one real quickly. My assignment will be to asking them to pick a social issue from early British literature and analyze, you know, one issue from this. Yeah. That sounds like the thing. Good. Okay. It sounds like we're on the right track. Let's keep the train chugging. I'm going to move back into our slide deck real quick. We're going to move into Criterion Two. Criterion Two is the place where, okay, students have identified an issue and now they have to put on one cultural lens that is not their own. You know, we want them to see an issue, to be able to see an issue from more than one cultural perspective. So, you know, the language in here, you know, just a quick glossary. You know, this is sort of a general shared definition for all of us. You know, what do we mean by cultural perspective? We mean a perspective that's shaped by membership in a distinct cultural group. Again, you know, we're defining cultural group pretty broadly. It can be a religious group. It can be groups from different national linguistic origins, et cetera, et cetera. But we do want them to be able to put on these different lenses and, you know, imagine how they might approach the issue if they, you know, were somebody who, you know, had been raised in a different way, or who was coming in from a different, you know, religious orientation, what have you. And so that's an important term. And the reason this matters is, you know, taken from, you know, our colleagues in sociology. You know, cultures vary in the underlying norms and values that regulate social behavior. You know, cultural values and norms are not all the same. So we want students to be able to pick up and set down those lenses with a little bit more agility when they've been through our classes. So that's what we're looking for here. So again, first criterion was identify the issue. Second criterion is going to be pick up other lenses and look at it before we move into the third criterion, which is examining their own lens. So does anybody have any questions about these shared terms? Are we good with them? Do we need a little discussion?
Are we going to get a copy of these?
Yeah, in fact, I can, you know, there's a there's a link to the rubric itself that I sent out in that list of links. So you should have that. And then I can make this slide deck available to everybody if you'd just like to take it straight from the slide as well. Okay. So we are going to rinse, lather, and repeat. So what you're going to want to do now is pick your key assignment back up, look at the second criterion, figure out if your assignment prompt is asking students to analyze the issue from more than one cultural perspective, noting the broader influence of each perspective locally, nationally, or globally. So we'll give you 10 minutes to talk with your colleagues about that point. If you're looking at your assignment and you realize it may not prompt that clearly, you know, this is a moment where you could workshop with your colleagues how to tweak it a little bit to get that thing out of it. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and we'll return to breakouts. I'll see you all in 10 minutes. Hey, everybody. Sorry about that. I popped into a breakout room to have a little chat with some folks. I think the rest of the breakout rooms are going to close in about 15 seconds. In the interest of time, what I'm going to do, let's wait for everybody to rejoin. Wonderful. In the interest of time, I'm just going to pop this Jamboard up on the link up in the chat and pull this up onto the screen if you want to record your thoughts. You know, some of the insights that you had about your assignments while we finish this thing up. Share right there so you can see. So yeah, you've got that space if you'd like to use it to share some final thoughts about your assignments. In the meantime, let me run through real quickly what the timeline is going to look like from here. Can everybody hold on? Slideshow. Can everybody see this again? Are we in the slideshow all right?
I see it.
Wonderful. Okay. So just real quick, here's the assessment timeline that we go by each fall. You know, obviously classes have already begun, 8/22. In September, this coming month, we are going to create an assessment sample. The good folks in IR work their number wizardry and they come up with a list of students that will hopefully lead to a sample with statistical validity. So they give us a list of students and the instructors whose classes the students are in. And then in late September or early October, we then shoot an email to the faculty whose students are going to be included in that sample. So you should be getting an email from me or Amanda, probably Amanda, you know, saying, hey, you know, congratulations, you're part of the sample this year. Here are the students we need work samples from. And then you have until December to get those in. The deadline's in mid-December on the 14th. So when you collect and submit artifact, we've got a cover sheet that kind of walks you through the process and allows you to articulate how the assignment aligns to the rubric. I'll just click on it real quick. This is also in that list of, can you guys see that? The key assignment cover sheet, that's in that list of links that I sent you. So you do have access to that in the list. And then really, yeah, you know, once you turn it in, your job is done unless you're a rater, and then it's not. So that really concludes what I've got to share with you. I'm going to stop share. Does anybody have any questions? Parting thoughts. I'm gonna put my email in the chat just so people have a way of getting a hold of me. There you go. Keep it, save it. I'm Melissa Elston. I'm happy to work with any and all of you if people want a little more personal feedback on their key assignments.